My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil, and today we are going to do getting started with Rhino 7 for Mac, and we're going to do a little bit different type of gig today. If you've seen any of my other videos, I wanted to talk about specifically SubDs today, and it's kind of one of the newer. Well, it's not kind of. It's one of the most exciting features of version 7. And it's a whole new style of modeling, and it's a whole new way of thinking about modeling. If you're coming from a NURBS background, you may have not been exposed to this type of thinking. If you're coming from a polygon background, you're like, yeah, I do this every day. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And what I'm going to try and do is actually go through several models very quickly and talk about this concept of speed sculpting, right? This idea of I've got a sketch, I want to blast something out, I want to get the foundation built, and I want to then have, the building blocks I need in order to start iterating and doing some design in 3D, which is the entire goal here, right? The entire goal with everything that I try and teach while I'm doing this stuff is to make sure that we are designing in 3D, not just modeling, right? Modeling is a technical skill, and we're certainly going to cover lots of that. But designing in 3D is something that, as the tools improve, as the speed of the tools and the quality of the tools improve, we are able to move some of the design process and some of the design iteration and thinking from 2D into 3D. And I'm going to asterisk that and say I've started in 2D, obviously, because there's some images on the screen here, some sketches to start with. But the idea is that we spend less time sketching, right? This is a sketch and don't look too closely at it here. It's a really kind of a scruffy sketch, right? It's a 2-minute thumbnail just to establish the basic proportions and kind of what I'm thinking about. And then the goal is to spend less time in 2D, more time in 3D, and make decisions where they actually matter, right? If we're making decisions in 3D and we're designing in 3D, we can actually see what it really looks like, because we all know we can lie, cheat, and steal on a sketch, right? I do it, you do it, everybody does it, right? And I don't know how many times I've had sketches from really talented designers on my desk, and they say, build it, and you start to build it, and you go, ooh, there's some magical thinking going on in here, and you actually have to solve the problems in 3D. So the goal is to have a conversation with yourself or somebody else in 2D very quickly, thumbnail scratches, everybody goes, yep, that's kind of what we want to do, and get to it, right? Once you get to it and you start building in 3D, you can make those decisions and see what it actually looks like. Once you know what it actually looks like, you can make your decisions and move forward and get the thing to a machine so that you can actually hold it in your hand at some point, which is the entire goal of kind of what we're doing here. So this project is going to start the same way that I start basically every project. It's with a sketch, right? I've imported this using the picture command. If you're not familiar with the picture command, you simply type picture in the command line, hit enter. It'll bring up a file browser. You'll find your picture, and you'll drop it into the scene. Once you've got it dropped into the scene, you can pick the object, go to your materials palette. Notice that whichever image or whichever material gets selected with this yellow border, and then you can change the object transparency down here in order to decide how much fade you get on that image. The less amount we put on there, and then more amount, and it starts to fade more or less, right? So we can adjust this and do it in a way that makes sense, right? If I pull it down here, it becomes more opaque. You can see the sketch. If I pull it up here, it starts to fade out, so it's easier to model over. The only other adjustment that I usually make to all of my pictures is I throw them on a layer, and then so that way I can turn them on or off using the visibilities. And then I also move them out of the modeling window. And the reason that I do that is if I build something in the center of the scene around the origin, and the image is also set up at the origin, the object will bisect the image, and it becomes difficult to see what it is that you're trying to model here today. So place the picture, drop it back in space. If we go to the front view, which is where we're going to be building mostly today, you can see that it's registered fine and does all that it needs to do. One of the benefits of having it on a layer, you can lock it, and now we can work over it with no problems. So because this is a symmetrical object, I'm only going to focus on one side because we can always flip and go from there. And if you've seen any of my earlier SubD videos, you know I'm a big fan of what I like to refer to as paper doll modeling. And paper doll modeling is modeling something flat, right? We're cutting it out with a pair of scissors out of a piece of paper, and then we add thickness or shape or capture volume or something like that to it at a later date. In this case, this is going to be paper doll, but it's going to be kind of accelerated paper doll. And the goal is, instead of laying out one single face, which we usually do, right? And then the typical paper doll thing would be I would hold down the command key and I would start dragging out here and add faces like that, right? We're going to actually use curves to get there a lot faster. And so I'm going to pick a curve. The most important checkbox here is SubD friendly. I want to make sure that that box is checked because that means that this curve is going to propagate SubD objects. If I didn't check that box and I were to extrude the curve or do something like that, it would extrude a poly surface or a surface. And in this case, as I draw this curve, and it behaves very similarly to what you would expect any NURBS curve to behave like. So we're still going to use our rule of 3 points to make a corner, and then we can come in here and make a few modifications to get a little bit closer to our artwork. And then we'll call that good. And then I can simply grab this and start scaling, hold down Shift, which makes a uniform scale, and then hold down the Command button, and I can extrude out a ring of SubD faces. And that's great, except it's equal all the way around the outside. And that's kind of not what I want. There's a little bit of a thick thin going on in this object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to shift drag and scale. And then I'm going to actually adjust my curve a little bit so that I build in the actual shapes that I want, right? And so come over here and I'm going to grab these points. I'm going to sneak them in just a little bit like that. And you can see that we've kind of captured the shape of that frame. I'm ignoring the temple landing pad for the time being. And let's pull these guys out just a hair more. And by the way, I'm going to move pretty fast during this video, so if you don't try and keep up with me or model along with me, just take some notes, and then we're going to post this video on YouTube later, and so that you can follow along at your own pace. So once I've got my curves built here, we're going to go back to the SubD menu, and we're going to just use a SubD loft. And I'm going to just grab these two curves, I'm going to loft them together, and you can see that it makes a beautiful ring of SubD surfaces. And this is set up with the natural shape segments. It's got 13 segments. I can also adjust this and using my middle mouse button, roll up or down. And if I roll up, it just adds more faces, which is not really all that useful. If I roll down, I can reduce the number of faces, but you see that my shape starts to fall apart. See how that starts to come apart as I go down? So you have to make kind of a judgment and say, okay, how many faces in here actually do I need in order to capture my shape? And in this case, I'm going to just stick with the recommended, which was 13, which was the natural shape segments. But you're not stuck with that. You can always change that if what you want. All right, we're in box mode here, and I like to refer to box mode as the modeling mode and smooth mode as the adjustment mode. And so I like to model in box mode specifically because it helps keep the model organized, right? And it keeps us from getting lost, and it keeps us from causing problems like this, where if I was to pull a face and cross itself and hit the tab key, this still looks okay in smooth mode, right? That actually looks like it's okay. But if I go to box mode, you can see that it's actually a little tortured, and we don't want that. So I like to model in box mode so that I can keep track of what's going on, and I can fix any problems if they arise. And I always like to use the mantra of clean box mode is going to equal clean smooth mode. And so what I can do now, since I have this, I'm going to hide my curves. Use cell curve and then hide. And then I'm going to just mirror this around 0, and it's going to make a copy. Then to make the bridge, I'm going to pick these two edges, and I'm actually going to use the bridge command to make the bridge. And I have to decide how many segments I need in here, right? One segment just goes left to right. If I come up here and roll my mouse button, 2 segments gives me a center line. Now the center line is useful because that gives me 1, 2, 3 edges, which is going to allow me to be able to not only modify the shape like this, right, but it's also going to allow me later down the road to modify the shape like this, right? You need 3 points to make a corner, 3 points to make a transition, and so we set ourselves up for success there by being able to do that. All right, I'm going to move these edges up just a little bit like that, and I'm going to move this edge a little bit up like that, and that gives me a perfect spot where I can just go boop and extrude that and adjust, and that gives me my temple landing pad. Now, it didn't propagate over to the other side because I didn't use, because I mirrored it, but mirror doesn't necessarily have history to it. So I'm actually going to run the reflect command, and I'm going to apply that reflect starting at 0, and I'm going to pick this side to reflect over, and you can see that that change now does propagate across the center line. And the cool thing about reflect is it is actually live, so as I pull this, it adjusts both sides, which allows us, again, to go faster. Right? So now if I go to smooth mode, you can see that I'm really pretty close to what my original artwork was. These edges are a little softer than I was hoping, which means I could probably add another edge here, but I'm going to save that for later on down the road. Now, the cool thing is because we've got the frame built, right, and we can obviously just add some thickness to it or do whatever we need to do, but it doesn't have any shape. And there's a couple of ways we can do that. We can go to the top view, and I can shift command drag all of these points out here, and then I can use the bend command. And because we're using reflect, I can start at the center line and just bend one side of it, and it's going to bend the rest of the object in a nice procedural way, right? And this keeps everything nice and smooth. But an even better way to do this is if we had an object, and if I go back to my standard toolbar and I grab just a sphere, and we'll go center, I'm going to stick that at 0, I'm going to make it big because I want to. I was trying to think of a good reason I was making it big. And I stick it back in space here. And basically what I want to do is I want to take this object and I want to follow this shape. Well, I can do that very simply if I turn my points on here, and I grab those points and I project them using project, and I'm going to project them onto this object. And what it does is it just takes those points and it moves them in space until they collide with this object. I can delete this now, and you can see that my glasses have this beautiful procedural bend to them, right? So let me hide this, so we're not using that guy anymore. And now I can take and add my shape. And I'm going to go to the menu up here, and I'm going to go to SubD, and I'm going to offset the SubD, I'm going to offset it backwards, and my offset distance, I don't know what my units are here. This might be massive, so let's just give it a shot. That's actually not bad. So that gives me my frame, right? Now, this is creased, and so it's got sharp edges on it. So I'm going to double click this entire edge, go back to my SubD menu, and I'm going to remove that crease, which softens it up. Same thing in this. I'm going to soften the insides of these. And then every time I do these webinars, somebody from the eyewear industry sends me a firm but polite email telling me that I'm a moron, and that's not how you do glasses. And I know. We're just talking about shapes here, man. Settle down. Glasses, the way they actually do glasses is you start from the lens and you build out. You don't build from the frame into the lens. So if you're actually looking for a career in eyewear, ignore everything I say here because you start with the lens and build out. But in this particular case, I want to just talk about how to build these kind of forms and you know, capture space and stuff like that. So I want a sharp edge on this, but I don't want it too sharp. So I'm just going to throw a little bevel on here. And then I'm going to double click both of these edges and remove that crease. And that gives me a soft edge, but it still has a little bit of definition. And we're going to do the same thing out here. I'm going to bevel this. Slightly. And then we're going to remove these creases. And that gives us a lovely kind of soft but still defined shape. Now we need to add the nose bridges, and so I'm going to pull those right out of here. So I'm going to pick this and use the extrude dot, and I'm just going to pull that shape out. And then I'm going to go back to my front view, and I'm going to go to wireframe so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to shift drag this edge, pull this up, shift drag this edge, command shift drag, sorry, command shift drag that edge, pull this down here, and that gives me the basis of my frames. And if I go back to shaded view, you can see what we've got here, right? So this gives us, in how many minutes are we talking here now? In 14 minutes with a couple of minutes of me blabbing, we've got something that we could actually throw through a printer, right? And so the next step that we want to do is try and work on the temple. So I'm going to actually hide this for the time being, and then we're going to go take a look at the temple. We're going to do the same thing that we did before. We're going to use a curve. Again, we want to make sure it's SubD friendly. We're going to just start up here, and we're going to just draw a curve like that, right? And in this case, I'm going to copy paste again. I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to turn my points on. And then I'm going to make my adjustments on this curve. Now, why did I copy paste instead of just drawing a new curve? Well, the reason for that is if you copy paste your original curve, then you get the parameterization of the original curve copied over to the other curve, right? So when I go to make a surface, the curves match, I guess is the easiest way to explain it. And so I'm not going to have to worry about any like crazy crossing in my isoparams or anything like that. It's all going to kind of line up and just be okay. So I've made these curves. I've got it pretty much set out the way that I want. I could kind of miss the shape here, so let's fix that. I need to like increase the size of my curves a little bit. Yeah, a little thin. I can see them, but you guys probably are having a hard time seeing them. All right, and we're going to pull these down just a little bit. There we go. So we've got our shape, right? We've drawn two curves. Again, we're just going to go SubD Loft. This is a super effective way to get there quickly. And we're going to go ahead and use the recommended because this is actually pretty good. In fact, I take that back. I may add one or two in there just to make things interesting. I usually try and recommend using as few edges as you need, But this edge right here is going to give me the ability to be able to bow this part of the frame in or out. And then these edges down here are going to give me the option to be able to adjust a little bit. If I add one more, doesn't really buy me anything, so I'm going to just leave it. I'm going to say okay. Now I want to sharpen up these edges out here, so I'm going to grab those 2 points right there, and I'm actually going to crease those, and that's going to give me a square end on that. And then I'm going to leave these edges down here soft, but I am going to just adjust them a little bit. You're like, but Kyle, you're adjusting in smooth mode. Yes, I know. In this particular case, we can do that. And then I don't like the distribution of that one, the way that it's kind of coming in at an angle, so I'm going to move that angle just a little bit. Like to have like nice kind of railroad track layouts on these things. So we'll go to our perspective view. We're going to do the same thing, SubD offset. And I'm going to use the same, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to use the same thickness so that everything matches. Just say okay. And then in this case, I'm going to leave these guys. Let's bevel this edge. Let's just go there right now. Give it to me. Oh, my curve is there. Can't decide between the curve and the edges. There we go. So let's bevel this. I always like to say I do the dumb stuff on my videos, so you don't have to. Double click to get the entire edge. Shift command double click, by the way. And then I'm going to just remove that crease. And so what that does is that gives me a nice soft SubD part, but I can also adjust it to do whatever I need, right? Because I laid it out the way that it needed to be laid out. So let's bring everything back. Ooh, not you. Skipping ahead a bit. I'm going to hide this guy again. And then I'm going to just place this. I'm going to relocate my gumball. Gumball relocate. Here we go. And I'm going to stick this. Let's see which edge is going to go where. This one is going to go out here. And let's move this back to there. And then we're going to rotate it -90. And that gives us, if we go to the right-hand view, that gives us the basics of what we need to do to see what this thing is going to look like, right? So in 20 minutes, call it 15, because I think I babbled for the first 5, we've got something that we could actually sit and throw through a printer. Now, the nice thing about this, because it's SubD, and this is the beautiful thing about SubD, is if you want to do iterations, you know, does this have a flatter part, or is it higher, or is it, you know, lower? Does the curve accelerate from the inside or the outside, or does it do something like this? Or, you know, now that you have this thing built, you can throw your first version through, and then you can do second version, third version, fourth version, fifth version. You can, by the end of the day, you could have 50 versions of these things that you could throw through a printer, and when you come in the morning, they're going to be all ready to go. You can test them and see how they work. So that's the beauty of this kind of SubD speed sculpt kind of thing, right? So not doing details, not getting into the details on that. If we were going to detail this out, I would probably at this point convert, I'd make a copy and I would convert that copy to NURBS and I would do my detailing in NURBS, right? I try to use SubD for the things that SubD works great for, which is roughing stuff out, organic forms, things that need to be iterated on a lot, you know, stuff like that. And then once it comes down to doing the detailing, I switch over to NURBS because NURBS is great for that. Right? So let's move this. I'm going to change this object layer, and then we'll hide everything here. And let's take a look at the next example, which is this drill. And I'm going to hide this. I'm going to unlock it first. I did the same demo yesterday for the Windows folks, and my audio died on me. So I had a beautiful recording, but none of the audio came through. So, we're doing an encore today. All right, so this drill, and if you can see the sketch, it's kind of light, but it's got this kind of mechanical element on the top, but then it's got this soft kind of organic shape at the bottom, right? And if we're going to build this, we would use the things that make sense. And the top part up here, we would probably build in NURBS. And it looks like my grid snap is on for some reason. I have my ortho snap on. Ah, there we go. And so I would do a standard NURBS build on this part, right? I would just do this as a revolved surface. Pull that out to there. I wouldn't even worry about the end of this thing because let's lock this again. And then we would just revolve this. It's going to be a surface. I'm not even going to bother doing a SubD. And I would let that roll, right? This last part down here, I'm going to just extract this surface. I'm going to change its degree from 2 to 3. And then turn the points on. And I'm going to add a few more points in here. So if I go edit, control points, I can insert control points, and I'm going to do 1 and 2, and that gives me extra points that I can then, come on now. I've broken it in 2 pieces. Let's rebuild it. Let's do 8 and 8. Rebuild. Now we've got points that we can play with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift click this handle, and I'm just going to scale it to 0. We're going to just bring these guys in and just collapse these. Let's do set point. I'm going to set these XYZ, and then we're going to set it to the center. Cell last, and then we'll just slide it back out here. Oops. Nope. Misbehaving. Happens to the best of us. Grab this and then just drag it out. And when we get all these points lined up, you can see that we get this nice kind of rounded end. And so this works great for this type of thing because I can just pull this out here. And again, I can adjust this by pulling these edges farther or closer. It gets sharper if I go close. It gets softer if I move far away. And that gives me everything I need for, holy smokes, this kind of stuff. All right. Clearly someone didn't clean up from their last demo. All right, so we've got the basis of this, and now we need to look at the handle, right? This would be the difficult thing to build if you were trying to do this in NURBS. And we're going to go back to what we did before, right? So we're going to go to our NURBS curve. It's going to be SubD friendly. And then we're going to just draw the basic outline of what it is we're trying to build. And I'm not even going to really sweat this too much. I'm going to ignore the trigger because it will likely be trimmed out later. And I've got the basis of what I need really quickly, right? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go SubD. I'm going to do SubD Loft. And it's going to give me, I'm going to turn the corners on because I want those to stay put. And it's going to give me a little bit of a mess here. So I'm actually going to adjust the shape segments. And I'm going to come up a little bit because I may actually pull some of these out. And you can see right around 11, see how that kind of straightens out a little bit? See how this is like, that's getting a little too crazy. We don't need that much, but if we go down, actually down is not bad. It's not pulling apart the shape too badly. Actually, I like that. Let's go with that. Let's go with about 6. So we're going to say OK. And then we'll go to wireframe. And then I'm going to hide my curves. And then we can just pull, I'm going to go to box mode. We can pull this thing a little bit better back into shape. All right, this got a little crazy out here. So let's straighten out some of that. That's another reason I like box mode, because it really, like, the sins are very, very visible. You can really see when you have made a hash of it very quickly. And it's much easier to fix. All right, let's see how close we are. Not bad. Again, the idea is to capture the form very quickly and then design this thing in 3D. So now we've got our basic shape, right? And I'm going to isolate this. And I don't have any way of adjusting the shape in this direction, right? Because I've only got 2 points. I've got 1 point here and 1 point here. I don't have anything in the center. So I'm actually going to just add, I'm going to add an edge right down the center of this thing. And I'm going to use the insert edge tool, which lives here. Actually, I want to use this one, insert point. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to just draw this right where I want it to be. And that gives me an edge in the middle. And the cool thing about that is now that I've got an edge in the middle, I can pull this shape in or out like that, right? So that gives me my crown of this shape. So I'm going to add a little bit of crown to this, and then I'm going to move it away from the origin because that's going to determine how thick it is. I'm going to mirror around 0. And then bridge is like blend surf for SubDs. So we're going to bridge this together, and I'm going to use one edge down the middle because, again, that gives me the ability to be able to adjust the crown in this direction. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Command Shift click, Command Shift click, Command Shift double click fills in the inside. Bridge, same thing. I'm going to use 2 segments there and apply. So now if I go to shaded mode, you can see that I've got the basis of this handle. And I can adjust the crown in this direction, right? It can get flatter, or it can get thinner, or more tapered. Same thing here, right? That gives me the ability to be able to adjust that crown. If I didn't have that center line, I wouldn't be able to do that. And then I can then start getting into this thing and then sculpting it and saying, okay, well, what actually is happening here? Does this thing need a little more shape in here? And see how I can watch the highlights update? Does that make a little bit more room for a thumb, right? If I pull this up like this, I can start tracking highlights and see what's going on. Do I like the way the light is falling on this thing? Does this need to move up or down? Does this highlight track high or low? Now we're designing. Now we are not just modeling, we're actually making decisions that impact the look, feel, and function of this product, which is the goal, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be just beating our head against modeling tools trying to figure out how to make Rhino work, right? We're supposed to be designing, and so this is where it starts to become fun. You can undo, redo all day long and play with this stuff. You can make copies and iterate. That's where the fun begins. But I digress, because we don't want to talk about details. I want to talk about roughing stuff out. I'm going to double click this edge down here. I want to close the bottom off, and I'm going to start scaling. I'm going to hold down Shift, and then I'm going to hold down Command, and you can see that that actually starts extruding the corner in there. And then I'm going to grab the extrude dot, and I'm going to pull down twice, and then I'm going to start scaling, Shift, Command, and I'm going to just scale that down to capture the bottom. Now, I would probably close that up, but if I was going to send it off to a printer, but the goal is that we get here very quickly. And so now I can take this edge and I can determine, like, how does that impact the drill? Like, does it come up like this, or does it come like, what does it do? And if I bring it up like that, then, you know, maybe these faces around here are too thick, and or maybe they're not thick enough. And if I change that, I can see what happens. I can see where that intersection happens and make a decision about how I want this intersection to look. And, you know, if I don't like how this is crowned up in the center like that, I can grab these two edges and I can start scaling it and change that. See how that line changes? Now we're designing. That's the goal. All right, so I'm going to call that one done. So let's throw this all on the drill layer. And we're going to hide that. And then let's take a look at a really difficult one. Let's look at a skull. And I kind of showed the last page of the book here, but if you were to tell me a year ago that, or 2 years ago, I guess Rhino 7's been out for almost a year now, but if you were to tell me 2 years ago that I was going to be able to do, you know, a human skull or a monster skull or anything, any kind of skull in Rhino, I would have rolled my eyes and said, "Good luck with that." The goal here is, again, SubD allows you the speed, flexibility, and adjustability to be able to capture these kind of extraordinarily organic shapes. And all you have to do is just break it down into its basic shapes and make sure that you're building your topology to follow. And in this case, we've got three main elements. We've got the eyes, we've got the nose, and we've got the exterior shape of the head, right? And skulls are vaguely spherically shaped, unless your head is shaped like mine, which has a little bit of a pointy top on it. So, but assuming you have a normal shaped head, we have to kind of figure out how to work with these elements. So again, we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to start with a curve. We're going to draw SubD friendly curves to capture these shapes, and I don't like that, so I'm going to back off a little bit. And I'm just going to call that good, because we're going to adjust this further. Let me lock this. I'm going to mirror this, and looks like I'm a little off center on my sketch, so let's fix that, because that'll make me crazy. So let's do this. Grab the sketch and slide it over. There we go. And I'm going to mirror this again. There we go. That's better. So let me lock the sketch again. So now I've got the basis of my layout, and then I'm also going to just draw the nose, and I'm going to start, and I'm just going to do one half of it. And then I'm going to mirror this. And then I'm going to use the match command, which is going to allow me to average these curves together to tangency. Say match. Do the same thing down here. And that way we just know that they touch, they're averaged, they're tangent, they're good, and we'll join. All right, so we've got a symmetrical layout right now. And the one thing I will tell you about any type of anatomy modeling, and you probably know this from art school, but don't make it symmetrical. If it's we're going to start symmetrical, but you want to add asymmetry to the thing, otherwise it'll look weird. It'll fall into what's called the uncanny valley. And the uncanny valley means that you've done a character or a humanoid type object that looks real enough that you're buying it as a human object, but not real enough so that you're comfortable with it. So if you've ever seen the movie The Polar Express, all of the characters in that movie fell so far deep into the uncanny valley where they just look weird and creepy so we don't want to do that. So that's my little spiel on skulls or people or whatever, characters. So I'm going to shift drag scale this curve. I'm going to hold down the command key and I'm just going to extrude out a ring. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Shift drag, hold down control, pull out a ring. Same thing here. Scale, command. We're going to pull out a ring on that. And actually it looks like my curve lost its SubD friendliness. And the way I can tell is when I pulled that out, see how it's got a center line on it? If this was a SubD, it wouldn't have that. And if I pick it, you can see that one open surface added to selection. So no problem. I'm just going to rebuild. I'm going to make it SubD friendly, and I'm going to crank up the point count here. And you can see that it falls right back into place. So I'm going to just rebuild that. Now, if I shift, drag, scale, see how it's just one ring? That's a good way to know whether or not you're in SubD or not. Now, this probably has too many edges in it, so I'm actually going to pull a few of these out. And I'm going to do that just by clicking and deleting. Shift command clicking actually and deleting, sorry. Everybody's like, I click delete and it doesn't work. Well, that's because you weren't doing what you're supposed to do because I didn't tell you the right thing to do. Sorry, my bad. All right, so let's do something like that, which is a little closer to what I was looking for. And then we're going to just start sticking this together. So I'm going to go from here to here, and I'm going to bridge. I'm only going to use one. And then I'm going to go here to here. Same thing. And then I'm going to go from here to here. And then I'm going to go here to here. Nice thing about the Mac interface is if you're doing a repetitive thing over and over again, I can just click my two edges and I can hit the right mouse key and it brings up the same function again. Now, in this case, I bridged across here, but see, I've got a center point down here, so I actually need to add one edge in there and say okay. And then I'm going to take these two edges and just stitch them together. And that brings out the basis of our face here. And so now I'm gonna go this way, and I've got 1, 2, 3 edges that I kind of want to work with. So I'm actually gonna pick these 3 edges, and I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna pull them down, and then I'm gonna go to box mode. I'm gonna grab this point, and I'm gonna grab those two and stitch. And do the same thing here, 1, 2, 3, and I'm only going to come down one edge, so I'm just going to pull this down, grab that and this, stitch. Now I've got another edge down here and another edge down here, so because we want to go fast, I'm actually going to grab all of these and do them at the same time, so I'm just going to pull down one more. stitch, stitch, and looks like my face has got a little tortured in here, so I'm actually going to pull this down a little bit like that. And now I've got this kind of layout through here. Let's do it like this. Double click. And then I can pull this entire thing down and then scale to 0, which is going to flatten that out, and then scale it in, which is going to bring it down like that. Now I can make a few adjustments here. I like scale for adjusting stuff in SubDs because it gives you a symmetrical response. And I'm going to add these guys, and I'm going to scale in 1D, but I'm going to hold down Command, and I can extrude out those faces. See how this is starting to go fast? See how we're starting to like, and I'm purposely not doing this symmetrically because I want it to have some asymmetry to it. And I probably would even go back and like mess with the eyes a little bit to make like this occipital a little different than this one, just slightly. Otherwise it'll look weird. And you won't know why. Like your brain will just go, something's not right here. It's the uncanny valley. Just do something a little bit like that. Now we've got the tops up here. Let's bring this out, and then we're going to get this entire row. We're going to pull up, scale in, and then I'm going to pull up again to the top, and flatten it by scale 0. And then I'm just going to pull these guys into a vaguely round shape. All right, nothing hard here yet. We haven't done anything that's very difficult. Oh, we made Batman. Oh, we made Batman. That's awesome. Now DC is gonna sue me. All right, so we've got this thing made out, right? We've got our basis, and we can decide whether we want to add faces, take faces away, or do all that kind of stuff. But I'm actually not going to worry about it. But how do we get this to turned into a shape, or turned into an actual skull? Well, I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the glasses. I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to make a center sphere, and I'm going to make it fairly big, and then I'm going to pull this up like that, and I'm going to project this onto the sphere. This is like a really fun trick. And so you don't have to worry about like deforming all that stuff yourself, because we're just going to project it right onto the sphere. Let's try it again. This, that. Oh, we got to do it in ortho. Project onto this. There we go. That's better. Now we can delete this guy. We don't need him anymore. Doop. And we've got the basis of our skull, right? So we've started to actually capture some form. Now there's a couple of ways that we can finish this guy off. And it looks like I've done this a few times. All right, there we go. 30 years of professional modeling coming at you, folks. All right, so there's a couple of ways I can add the rest of the form here. I can just grab this part and I can just extrude it back, and I can Shift Command Scale, and then I can extrude back like that, Shift Command Scale, and then I can extrude back again, and Shift Command Scale, something like that, right? And that works. It's pretty nasty at this point, but it does work. The other thing I could do is I could actually just build a sphere, a SubD sphere. Something like this. And bring it down. It's massive. Something like that. And then I would just delete these faces here. And probably these faces. And then it would just be a matter of trying to bridge this all together. And this probably doesn't have enough faces, so I subdivide it once. And then we can start 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Just kind of pick my way through here. And I would probably do just one face here to keep things simple. And then 2, 3, 4, 2, 4. Oops. Nope, not you guys. Nobody invited you guys. Stop it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, come now. Helps if I pick accurately. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Hooray, he did it right. And then I would just work my way around this, right? And if I was being lazy, which I kind of am, let's just reflect this whole thing. And I'm going to put the mirror plane here and pick this side, and then we get the whole thing wrapped up. And we can decide whether we want to keep this edge or not. We delete it and just turn that into an n-gon, or we can leave it triangling off, or we can stitch these 2 points together. Doesn't really do much there, but we can figure out how to deal with that later. But in the meantime, we've got the basis of our shape. We can start pulling out the eyes. We can start messing with the brow. We can start pulling out the nose. We can bend it to get a better shape. All right, so now it starts to give us the basis that we can work with. But again, this is like, and this is the point where you'd go get reference, right? Instead of just making this up, I would get some actual reference of what a skull looks like and start tracing over it instead of using my, really janky sketches. But the basic layout is the same, right? You're going to start with the eyes, you're going to bridge them together, you're going to bridge the nose, then you're going to work your way around. And then once you've got this is now a piece of clay. You can push and pull this and do whatever you want to do with it, And I'm absolutely, positively stoked that we made Batman. So now you've got the basis for anything that you want to do as far as a character is concerned, right? And so once you get a nice base skull like this, save it off. Put it in a file somewhere, build a clip art file of SubD parts. Because this stuff is so easy to modify, build a clip art file of all your SubD bits, and then the next time you need to do a character, just pull the head in and move and mush it around, right? Next time you need to do a pair of glasses, pull your glasses, buck in and mush it around, and you'll be done in 8 minutes instead of 30 minutes, right? So now we're talking about going really, really fast and being able to really quickly iterate through concepts and get to a place where we spend all of our time designing and less of our time, modeling, technicianing, right? Which is the whole goal here. All right, so that's the skull. And the last one that I wanted to talk about was something even more complicated than a skull, which would be something like a car, right? And in this case, it's an old 60s race car. It's based on an old Chaparral race car. And the way to lay out a skull, right, is there's a formula. You start with the eye sockets, you pick and the nose socket, and you make a ribbon and you bridge it together and go from there. The same way that a skull has a formula, cars have a formula, and the formula behind cars is you start with the wheel arches. And so I'm going to start with a SubD cylinder, and I'm going to pull this out to make one of my first wheels. And then I'm going to just go and I'm going to just grab this piece and extract it. And I want to extract just that strip. And the reason for that is I'm going to use that as a basis for my wheel arch. And so I'm going to place that there, and I'm going to just, because I already have it, I'm going to drag, tap Alt, and make my rear wheel as well. And then I'm going to delete a couple of faces. And then I'm going to start moving this around. In fact, I might delete that. And I'm going to just start pulling this into shape. We'll call that good because we're going to try and go fast. And then we're going to do the same thing back here. I love the immediacy and the kind of instant gratification that SubD modeling provides. It really kind of works well with my hummingbird-like attention span. I've always felt like as a designer that my brain can go faster than my hands can go, and that's changing. I'm starting to feel like the tools can keep up with my head now, and that starts to become really fun. So we've got our wheel arches. I'm going to double click. I'm going to not do that. Let's make our corners stay put. So let's go SubD, and we're going to crease those corners so that they stay flat. And then I'm going to grab this edge, and I'm going to shift, drag, command, and I'm going to extrude a ring out. Right? This should look familiar now. We did the same thing with the eyes. Drag, shift, command, and drag out a ring. And this is the basis of everything that we're going to do going forward. So I'm going to grab this edge, and I'm just going to line up my rockers. Like that. And how big this ribbon is determines how much landing the wheel arch is going to have. So if the wheel arch is really thin and blends into the body, this will be a really thin ribbon. And this car actually has a fairly generous blend into the bodywork, so I'm going to leave it a little bit wider. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with the glasses and the skull. I'm going to take these two things, I'm going to bridge, and now I'm going to add some edges because I need to be able to capture some additional detail in here. So I'm going to throw about 5 edges in there and say, okay. Go to wireframe so we can see the sketch, and we'll just do this in box mode as well. And then we're going to just pull this stuff down to start capturing more of that shape. Pull the face out. See how fast this goes? This is fun. We get to make stuff really quickly now. And same thing in the back. I'm just going to pull this out. And then this entire edge right here, I'm going to add one more row because that's going to let us bend this thing over. And this edge, I may drop this edge a little bit. And then I might want one more edge along the bottom so that I can roll this. I can roll this bottom over. So let's go and insert a few points. So that way, now this edge, we can use that as a break line and bend the rocker under. So let's grab this and this. We're almost done, so if you're time sensitive, I'm gonna bend that in a little bit, bend this edge in a little bit. I might need one more edge in here, so let's add another row of edges in here. Let's start up here. There we go. So now I can grab these guys down here, bend that in. This whole row up here, I'm probably going to take and bend it over a little bit like that. And then if we switch to shaded mode, that's a crease we're going to get rid of. You can see that we get the basis for what we're trying to do here. I'd move this away from the center line, which would determine how wide the thing is. And then we would simply bridge the entire thing together. I would use probably 2 sections so I get a center line. And then if we wanted to add cockpit, we would just extrude that down. Okay, and very quickly, with the exception of this crease, we have the basis of what we could then use to put together the rest of this car, right? So the idea behind this is I just wanted to make sure that we were covering how to think about things, how to think about topology, how to think about capturing space. And maybe this model doesn't go any farther than this in SubD, and we mash it around a little bit and we do some modifications to it and we add a little bit of shape to the nose. And then maybe what we do is we go into NURBS and we do all of the rest of the detailing. Maybe this is as far as we go. And that's the whole concept behind, speed sculpt, speed, using SubD to go fast, using SubD to kind of visualize a shape. In fact, I've even mashed something together in SubD really, really ugly just to capture the form and see what the model is going to look and feel like. And then I'll actually go back, and if it's the type of model that requires it, I'll actually go back and build the whole thing in NURBS using my SubD stuff as a 3D control drawing. So there's a lot of ways to use this stuff that can be super valuable when you're in the concept and design phase, and you're trying to capture form and get your idea down as quickly as possible. I find that SubD is a really, really good tool for that. So this is about as far as I want to go today as far as this kind of stuff. If you are interested in more SubD stuff, please check out our McNeil YouTube page, which is here, and I threw this in the comments. This is where all this stuff is going to live. This one is a good, this SubD modeling in Rhino, this trike is a very good from the first line art all the way down to the rendered piece. If you want to see a project all the way start to finish, this is a good place to start. And then there's several other things in here. There's a chair that I did. If you're a Mac person, this, let's see, where is it? No, it's going to be deep in this playlist somewhere. But this chair right here, getting started, Rhino 7 for SubD Mac. This is a very simple, very easy SubD project to get going with that also goes start to finish with all the detailing, as well as this faucet down here. That's another good one if you're looking for more SubD stuff. This seat down here, again, also more SubD stuff, but a little more complicated. We get a little deeper into the details and how to handle that. So, so those would all be resources to take a peek at. So, any questions? Anything I can answer before we take off? We're 10:03, which is pretty good for an hour to do 4 models. Go ahead and hit the chat with any questions. If not, I will let you go and thank you for joining. And I will catch up with you next time. We do these about once a month. And so keep an eye on the website and the forum for the announcements on when we're going to do another one. And if that's all, I'll leave you here. My name's Kyle Houchins. I'm a technical trainer from McNeil. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.